What's,
You are live.
okay, all right. We'll just, give it a minute.
I'll send you an email. Yeah. Just send me a text.
Just waiting for 10 o'clock.
That's okay.
Because there could be people logging on all over the town.
I suspect from Brussels and other places where they're vacationing. Brussels, Indiana. Yeah.
I never knew. It's like there's a Switzerland, North Carolina.
Is there a Switzerland?
Is anybody starting to schedule any travel?
We scheduled it?
Yeah.
We actually have, but we're driving to Wisconsin. That's not gonna be fun.
We're
a long
going to the
drive.
islands.
Yeah, I went over to travel up in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Stopped for gas in 54 to 26 with between Spartanburg and
Yeah, yeah.
and it cost me $1,800
How much?
for bad gas.
Really?
And so make sure you go to a reputable place.
Wow.
We always stop right there at Reedville Road.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big station down the street. Anyway, I think we are at, yeah, that can,
Place that has customers.
Yeah.
that can do a job to your,
Use spark plugs, a couple of fuel injectors.
yeah.
Oh, boy.
Wow. All right, let's go ahead and call this town council to order. And we only have one item of business on the agenda, which is to consider the approval of ordinance 2020-05, which is an ordinance to adopt the fiscal year 2020-21 budget for the town of Kiowa Island. Again, while everybody here is aware of that, just for those who may be listening in, this budget requires 2 readings plus a public hearing. So the budget was discussed and approved at the Ways and Means Committee earlier in May. It was at the last town council meeting, we had a public hearing, and it also was approved by the town council at first reading. So this is the second and final reading of the ordinance. This could be a quick item, but I just want to mention a couple things. You know, even though we've talked about this a number of times, and everybody sitting up here knows this, on the potential basis that some people are listening, or that sometimes the Island Connections and other media pick up the conversation. I do want to stress a couple times, and I have tried to stress that like other municipalities who are being impacted mainly by the coronavirus with their budgets, we are also, I think we've said, you know, I've said a number of times that Kiowa has very much an economy-based revenue stream. I'll reinforce for the 100th time that we do not have a property tax. And so all of our revenues in this town come about predominantly either through direct business activities, such as building permits and business licenses, or they come about as the result of tourism and the accommodation taxes that result. And so therefore, you know, there are years, and we have been coming off a number of years where we've had year after year of very strong economic activity on Kiowa, and the town has benefited from that. But also we're susceptible when we move into an environment where there is a significant downside in our economic activity, and we're seeing that in our budget this year. So Before I bring this up for a vote, I just want to highlight again a couple key numbers here. The budget that you are looking at to approve for this year, our current projections are that we are going to see approximately a 19.4% reduction in revenue over what we budgeted for 2019 to 2020. And that is predominantly as a result of both reductions in building permits, business activity, but then obviously the significant loss of accommodations taxes that we are projecting for this last quarter. That reflects approximately a $2 million reduction in revenues for this year, if in fact those numbers pan out to be correct. In essence, what we are seeing for 2019-20 is a $3.5 million revision in our budget. We move it from a $2.5 million surplus to a $1.5 million deficit. Now, obviously, the revenue impact didn't drive all of that, and a significant part of that is the movement of the road project funding from next year into this year. But nonetheless, we're approving next year's budget while at the same time we're sitting on potentially a pretty significant reversal in our revenues for this year. Also, just want to get the headline out there that the budget that we are now preparing to approve incorporates a 25% reduction in revenue over last year's budget, approximately $2.63 million in reduced revenue. Now, we're fortunate that the budget we're about to approve actually has within it relatively few reductions in spending. They have some, and there's been a great effort in that budget to make sure that it is reflective of the revenue environment that we're in. But we've been able to do that largely by the fact that we've been moving from environments with a surplus to now one where we've eaten up the surplus, but we're still able to essentially fund our activities. So it is a significantly different environment that we see ourselves in. The last comment I simply want to make is that I think it's also very clear that there is a lot of uncertainty going forward on what the revenue situation really is going to look like. There are a lot of assumptions in here about what the ongoing impact of the coronavirus is going to be on tourism. I think we've seen some signs that suggest that maybe it may be less dire than we thought. Certainly anybody who's walking on this island right now recognizes that tourism has come back much faster than I think was anticipated. But before we get too comfortable with that, we also need to recognize that all it would take is Kiawah to become a hotspot for a fall second wave, or any number of things could take us back off the rails. So I think we're seeing optimistic signs with regard to the tourism side of things, but until we get through the fall, I don't think we'll see that. And I think it's also important to recognize that all of the reductions in here were not tourism or coronavirus related, and that even despite this, we were seeing and we were forecasting for some reductions in business activity, both in terms of building permits and business license activities. So I know this is all information that all of the town council members are completely aware of, and I know I only have one member of the public sitting in the audience, but nonetheless, I just want to make sure that in a budget that's complicated, the couple important headlines are out there. So with that, I would accept a motion. Let me start by asking for a motion and a second, and then we can open up the budget for discussion. Do I have a motion to approve ordinance 2020-5?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Do I have any discussion?
I have a question about the existing budget. I understand that in the wildlife program area, there is money that will be remaining this year. And my question is this, can that be used in 2021?
I don't think it can, we don't carry money over. But let me get on, I mean, I'm assuming that the underlying desire here is all of us have gotten a number of communications in the
Right.
last day concerned about reductions to one of our wildlife programs.
Correct.
So I'm guessing that's the, and I'm open to any discussion and any
Oh.
suggestions and any recommendations that people want to bring forward.
Well, I really feel that.
But we can't carry the money over. I mean, we would
Okay,
need.
thank you, that answers that question. The funding of the dolphin program, I think, is really important. Over the past 3 years, they've talked to over 10,000 people, and that's a lot that's said about Kiowa. And, you know, we are unique in that we have a sanctuary for sea turtles, a sanctuary for bobcats, and also for the dolphins. And this educational program is extremely important. And I'm just wondering if there's any chance we could get an additional $3,000 to fund that program.
Well, I will look to Stephanie in a minute, but I guess I would go at it one of two ways. If there were a recommendation and an agreement within the town council to shift, and how much are we talking?
3,000.
3,000? If there is a,
Where's the $3,000 come from? I have a different number in front of me, so that's why I ask.
I was evaluating this and looked at the 9,000, and I just went for 1/3 of the 9,000 that was originally requested. And I was looking at it in the wildlife funding.
I'm still confused. What does $3,000 cover?
Dolphin, in the dolphin program.
Again, that's just a different number that I've got, Mary Ann,
Right.
so I'm trying to
yeah,
understand.
because I thought we saw a revised
Yeah,
budget of
so
4,000.
based on- I think-
377.
I
What
wasn't
Ms.
going with that.
What Ms. Conley is doing is that she was not, as she said, the original budget that was, the number that was thrown around was $9,000. And so when we talked yesterday, prior to receiving this updated information from Ms. Lauren Rust, is that her last name? Yeah, Rust. Ms. Conley had thought and suggested that instead of going the full 9,000, she was going to recommend just 3,000. So we got this late last night. I got it this morning, and I'm sharing with you all now that Ms. Russ has gone in and modified her budget, but also she can see that the year that she's looking to do is our fiscal year. So currently she's funded through the end of that program is funded through the end of this year. Our contract goes until end of August or September, but somehow she has enough funding to get her through the end of this year. So what I asked Jim to do was to talk to Ms. Russ and say I preferred for her to follow our fiscal year and see if she can come up with a revised budget based on my discussion with Ms. Conley. She has, so her proposal is basically $4,400 from January 1 through the end of June. About $3,100 of it would be her salary. $520 of it would be for additional weekly maintenance of volunteers and data, and then $300 of it is for educational materials. So I think what Ms. Conley was doing was just going based on information.
I had been asked.
Okay,
to
but
put-
sorry, wait. That's 4,377 for half a year. Round that up to 4,500. That's 9,000 for a full year. So that number hasn't changed at all.
No.
It's the same number.
Right.
Let me
right?
explain
Yeah.
what I was saying. I have been asked by many people to support this program. What I was told was they wanted financial support to show the town's support for the program itself. In investigating this, I saw that a large portion of the money was for the salary of this person. And I thought rather than go for the whole amount, why not put a partial, $3,000 was the number I selected, and said this will carry them through for the first quarter. If there was money available in November, we could go back and maybe fund the rest of the program. That's all I was thinking, in an effort to respond to the residents regarding this.
Well, let me ask a question. The funding in place right now is, because I've heard two different things, is carrying this program through till the end of the summer or till the end of this calendar year?
End of this calendar year.
Okay. So, I mean, just to try to frame the discussion, I would suggest, outside the fact that there's the potential of saying it's a great program, but we're not going to fund it, which was the position on the table. And I understand the reasons for not doing that. I would frame this different. I think there are two different approaches that we could take. If there is a recommendation to want to restore in the budget funding for this program, then I think it's fine for any council member to make that recommendation. But what I would ask is that there needs to be, as part of that, an identification of where the offsetting reduction is going to occur. That would be one way of approaching it. The second way of approaching this is, in my introductory comments, I did make the comment that there is a lot of uncertainty, I think, in this budget year, or in this budget, more than we probably have seen in the past. And I do think that we are going to have to periodically, we may have opportunities to reassess during the year where our revenues are coming in and what impact that might have. So another option would be for us to agree that we would put this item on the budget for the November town council meeting, and we can agree, to actually now say that will be an agenda item, and we could take this item up in November, at which point we will have seen July, August, September, October, we'll have seen 4 months of budget and revenue activity. We will still be a month prior to the cessation of our funding of this item, and we could simply put this item up for reconsideration in November at the point in which potentially we wouldn't then be dealing with offsetting funds, but we may find that we're in a different place in terms of revenue. I'm not proposing, I'll leave it to town council members to go propose which direction, but I would just sort of frame this. I would suggest those are sort of the two different approaches that we could take.
Well, the source of the funding that I was looking at was the wildlife education in that budget. However, since the dolphin program is funded through the end of the year, as you said, and if I could be assured that we would have this on the budget in November to look at existing funds at that point, that's something I'd certainly consider. I just feel that this...
Do you want to make a motion to that effect?
Yes, I'd just like to make a couple of other... This is one of the very few places where we have the strand feeding. And the education in this area is really, really important to help people and to help the dolphins. They set up behavioral guidelines, which includes some social distancing of 15 feet behind the dolphins. And along with the other programs, we have the sea turtles, bobcats, shorebirds, etc. It really adds to the value of Kiowa Island.
And I want to make sure that I don't think anybody on the town council is not supportive of either the broader issue of dolphins or the program. I mean, we got into this situation again because of the reductions in the budget, and at that point trying to make decisions on the relative value of different programs. So it would be wrong if anybody listening to this conversation presumed that we were somehow wanting to or otherwise not interested in supporting dolphins. So,
Then I would make the motion then, unless there's other people that want to talk, to put this on the agenda for the November budget discussion. Dolphin Stewardship Program.
okay, do I have a now, the way this, we'll look for a second. If we have a second, we will vote on that amendment. In which case, if it's approved, then this will go on the agenda for November.
Okay.
If it is not approved, then that, just so we understand, that does not negate the ability of any other, of either you or any other council member making a follow-up motion for any other
Okay.
approach to dealing with this issue.
Thank
So
you.
I want to,
I just wanted to, if I may,
let me get the, since we have a motion on the table, let me get the motion in second.
well, we haven't discussed it yet.
We gotta get the motion, we gotta get the motion.
This
I
is
need
a
a
new
second
We're
motion.
not going to
first.
vote straight away, we're going to discuss first.
I need a second first. So
Second.
we've made a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, now go ahead, Klaus.
Perfect. You know, I'm keenly aware that saying anything that is not 100% supportive of the Dolphin program puts you right, has a risk of putting you right in the sort of league of, you know, clubbing baby seals. But I will risk it anyway. First of all, I love dolphins. I really do. I don't love 20% revenue reductions in a budget. Okay, and those two things, we just have to face them both. Secondly, I have to say in the communications that I saw, one thing ticked me off, and what ticked me off was that the town should show its commitment to this program by dedicating money to it. That implies to me that that is the only way the town can show its commitment, and that annoyed me because that is just simply not the case. I think the Dolphins probably have a much better PR agency than a lot of the other very deserving programs that are being cut in this budget. I suspect if we give this time and let other people loose on sending the extremely eloquent and beautifully phrased, and I say that without any irony, communication that we got about the Dolphins, we would find that other programs that are being cut are also very, very deserving. So, I mean, I would certainly, the motion on the table here is to table this till November. I can go with that. If the motion had been, let's find $3,000 elsewhere, I would have been very, very skeptical because, you know, any commercial entity of any kind, municipal, commercial, whatever it is, that has a 20% revenue reduction looking ahead to the year has to make very tough choices. And I understand that they've talked to 10,000 volunteers, but you know, the money has to come from somewhere.
Any other?
Yeah, I comment, thanks, Klaus. Mary Ann, I appreciate what you're saying. I think, given the early indications of recovery, there is probably a fair chance, not certainly 100% chance, that we could make several budget adjustments later in the year. There's also the chance that we have less money coming in than we think we do, and then we've got even tougher choices to make. But I think it's quite reasonable to ask that this be raised again as a budget item, which might be one of many, in November, which would not impact this program negatively, and we would have a ton more information at that point. It's just a lot of uncertainty. So I would support what is being suggested now, which is just let's reconsider this officially in November when we've got better data.
Any other?
Yeah, I'd make one comment. My frustration with this issue is that we're budgeting by whoever screams loudest. And that's just nuts. I can think of other organizations who have had their numbers cut in this budget. If I were part of the Conservancy and I'd watch this debate, I'd start screaming tomorrow morning because they've been cut. They've been cut more than these guys have been cut, at least, you know, from dollar figures. So I also am somewhat uncomfortable with the motion because I don't think the motion should be to raise this issue in November. I think we talked earlier in this process, certainly the Ways and Means Committee, that come November, we intend to review a number of things. I'm uncomfortable elevating the dolphin program, and I love dolphins, I'm uncomfortable raising them to a higher level than somebody else. So I'm not going to support the motion because I don't want to single out this organization. I would support reviewing and having it formalized that we review the budget in November for a whole variety of issues if the revenues come back as we hope they come back. But I think this attention to one program because we've received 10 emails is just not a good way of managing a town.
Any other conversation? Otherwise, we will put this to a vote.
Just given what Chris said, I think that that speaks to me. I think that is a much better idea to have a November on the agenda for the November Town Council, a formal point to reevaluate the entire budget, all programs cut, and so on and so forth, without singling out a particular one. I think that's the better solution.
Let me make sure I understand, because if you reject or vote down this motion, would it be your intent at that point then to make a follow-up motion that in November we would have a formal review of the budget, including all items?
Yes.
Or is it? Or is
Yes.
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 Any further discussion?
I don't look at the Dolphin program as being, I think it's kind of unique. And given that we pride ourselves in the stewardship of our wildlife here, I think it's a program that is not available in most places. So I don't look at it as the same as every other program that has been negatively impacted by the financing. That's all I have to say.
If I could make a comment?
Go ahead. We don't technically have a citizens comments item, but
Right.
since we,
He's the only citizen. Come on.
and Stephanie's nodding no, but since I got this, you go for it, okay?
I appreciate the council's indulgence here. Scott Nelson, 65 Persimmon Court. I've been involved with the Dolphin program almost from its inception. And I think that Lauren and Jim have worked out a compromise position here. And I think the compromise is to find some money, not the full 9,000 that was in the, that was funded last year. You know, I think what Mary Ann, if I can guess what you're alluding to, is that it's not an all or nothing proposition. Now, it was hard to tell in the budget materials that at least I saw, and I was out of town for the Ways and Means Committee, so I missed that, I guess. But the Dolphin program was cut in its entirety, where some other programs were cut partially. Mm-hmm. So the proposal and what Jim and Lauren worked out, I believe, is to restore some funds to the program. So it's not cut entirely, but just as other programs have been cut, this would be cut, but not in its entirety. So that's what I'd like the council to consider, and I think a compromise has been worked out that would be acceptable to Lauren as organizer of this program.
Okay, thanks.
I guess I misunderstand then. I thought the compromise, is that funded or is that unfunded?
That it would be
That sounds
partially
like
funded.
that sounds like Jim found it in his budget. If so, we don't have to have the discussion.
No.
But so I'm confused. Which is it?
We're working behind the scenes.
Well,
No, there was no
you can't
agreement
work
on
budgets
funding.
behind the scenes. You either have the money or you don't, right? Sorry, I'm not agitating you. I'm just trying to get clarification.
Okay.
Is this funded or not funded?
Not
The
funded.
compromise.
Not funded.
Then, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but no
That's good. If it's
county
not, that's all I
trial.
wanted to know. It's
All right.
not funded.
All right, so we have a motion on the table to take no action today to refund this project. However, to make a formal commitment that this will be placed on the November agenda for additional further consideration. That's the motion on the table. There's been discussion, well, I'll stop it first and we'll take the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Nay.
Nay.
Okay, it passes.
Thank you.
Having said that, I do believe that in November, that this will be placed on, that the funding has not been, at this point, the funding has not been renewed, but it will be formally placed on the November agenda for further review. However, having said that, I also will say now that the intention will be in November that we will actually do we need to do a review at that point, formal review of the budget.
Should that not also, could there not be a motion that such a formal review should indeed be on the agenda?
If you would like to make one,
I would move.
Second.
Do we have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. So now we need to approve the full budget incorporating those two motions. And we have a motion and a second. Stephanie, point of order, do I need to add anything else to that motion? We have a motion and a second, including the two motions that have just been added and approved. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes, we did have a motion, yeah. All right. So, just to summarize for anybody who is listening, what we have approved is the original budget that was reviewed and approved by Ways and Means, by first reading through the public hearing, and is in the materials that people are looking at today. What we've also agreed is that in November, we will formally in town council review the budget again at that time. While we normally look at budgets, the point being we will ensure on the agenda that we have a formal discussion of the budget, which will allow us at that point to have had insight into the entire first quarter of the fiscal year, and that we will look at that budget, and specifically as part of that look, we have called out and will look at the funding of the Dolphin program as one of the specific line items in that overall budget review. That is what we have agreed to. Yes? Okay. I think that is the only item on the agenda. Before I call for adjournment, I'll just go down all the council members if there are any other items or issues, although nothing is budgeted. Claus, do you have anything?
None.
None.
No? Chris, I want to, Darota's not here, but I want to obviously thank you as the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and Darota and Stephanie and all of the staff who has worked so hard on pulling this budget together, which all budgets take a lot more time than people probably realize. This one took even more because of all of the uncertainty and the changes that were taking place. I also, before I adjourn, just want to give a heads up to the council that I may want to call another quick special meeting of the council before the end of this month. I think we can't, it's not on the agenda, so we can't discuss it here. But as you know, we still have several emergency orders still outstanding. In some cases, our emergency orders were driven by and were consistent with earlier orders that had come from the governor. In other cases, they were orders that we specifically put in place here. Stephanie and I, town administrator, are right now trying to go through the process along with our town attorney of really trying to assess both what are all of the orders that have been rescinded by the governor's office, and what are the ones that are still outstanding, and when do they expire, and trying to reconcile that with the ones that we still have outstanding so that we can make some decisions here quickly as to whether we have some that it is time for us to have a discussion and determine whether we want to pull down. Specifically, some of the ones that we still have the emergency order with respect to no groups in excess of 10 people. We have some specific orders in place with regard to grocery stores that are both impacting occupancy and the numbers of related people who can be in the store. So I think that we'll probably decide we want to clean some of that up before the end of the month. Some of those items do expire on their own, but they expire into July, in some cases after July 4th. And I think we'd like to very possibly get it all cleaned up and figure out what we think as a council needs to stay in effect and what does not over the next couple of weeks. So we're working through that, and there is a chance that we might call a special meeting just to go through those last items and see where we're at. With that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned.